All right, today we're diving into one of the biggest challenges in any classroom, management. But I want you to just forget everything you think you know about adding more rules or getting stricter with consequences. We're going to talk about a really powerful mindset shift, moving away from just demanding compliance and toward building a classroom that runs on absolute crystal clear clarity. So, here's what we've got on tap. First, we're going to dig into something I call the buried expectations problem. Then, we'll get really clear on the difference between rules and expectations. They're not the same thing. After that, we'll look at the science of why this all works, and then the best part, the how-to. How to actually teach these expectations. And we'll wrap it all up with a super practical clarity checklist you can start using like tomorrow. Okay, so let's start with a feeling I bet every single educator out there knows. You've got rules for everything, right? Posted on the wall, in the syllabus. But the classroom still feels kind of chaotic. So what is going on here? Well, this right here gets to the absolute heart of it. The issue usually isn't that you don't have enough rules. It's not that your expectations are unclear. The real problem, it's that your most important expectations are completely buried under this avalanche of other rules and procedures. I mean, we've all seen this, right? The poster with like 20 different rules, the syllabus that feels more like a legal contract. And what's our first instinct when a new problem pops up? Just add another rule to the list. But here's the thing, that doesn't create clarity. It just creates noise. And the real insight here is that students don't behave better with more rules. They behave better when they genuinely, deeply understand what's actually expected of them. So that brings us right to the core of the solution. We have to understand the huge difference between rules and expectations. They might sound similar, I get it, but they work in completely different ways. Okay, look at this. This example just nails the difference. A rule says no phones, period. It's basically a stop sign. But an expectation, that's different. It says technology supports learning, not distraction. See? It gives the why. It frames the whole thing around a positive, shared goal, which makes it so much more powerful and way easier for students to actually buy into. So if we zoom out a bit, you can see the bigger pattern here. Rules are reactive, right? They're usually made after something goes wrong, and all they do is demand compliance. But expectations? They're proactive. They're all about purpose. And because of that, students can apply them to all sorts of new situations. They're just so much easier to remember and use. And here's the bottom line, really. Rules tell students what not to do. It's a list of don'ts. But expectations, they teach students how to succeed. They're like a roadmap for being a successful member of the classroom community. It's a total 180-degree shift in focus. Okay, so why is this shift so darn effective? Well, this isn't just some nice-sounding educational theory. It's actually backed by science. It's all about how our brains work. So let's take a look at what's actually happening inside a student's head. All right, number one, it reduces what's called cognitive load. Basically, it just simplifies everything for a student's incredibly busy brain. I mean, just think about it for a second. A student is already juggling their schoolwork, social stuff, all their emotions, and all of that takes up a ton of mental energy. When you throw a long list of rules at them, you're just adding more stuff for their brain to track. It's mental clutter. But when you have just a few clear expectations, you cut down on that decision fatigue. The right behavior becomes more automatic, and that frees up all that precious brain power for the thing that actually matters, learning. Okay, second big reason. This approach directly helps build executive function skills. You know, all those critical life skills that help us plan, focus, and basically manage ourselves. Look, skills like impulse control or just getting started on a task, those are still developing, especially in kids and teens. A lot of rules just assume students have already mastered those skills. But expectations, they act like scaffolds. They give kids a clear structure, like, this is how we start class, or here's what to do when you're stuck. It doesn't just demand a skill, it actively helps build it. And the third big scientific win, oh, this is a good one. It dramatically cuts down on those exhausting power struggles that can just completely derail a lesson. So much of the conflict we see in classrooms comes from fuzzy lines, from ambiguity, not actual defiance. It's when things are unclear that arguments happen. Just think about the language. When you say, you broke a rule, that feels personal, right? It's an accusation and it just invites an argument. But what if you reframe it? What if you say, hey, that isn't quite matching our expectation of being respectful. It's totally neutral, it's instructional, it invites the student to make an adjustment, not pick a fight. Okay, so we've covered the why. We get it. Now let's get practical. Let's pivot to the how. How do you actually build a classroom culture around these clear expectations instead of a mountain of buried rules? Believe it or not, the magic number is 3 to 5. That's it. Seriously, you don't need this long scrolling list. You just need a few broad, powerful expectations that can cover pretty much any situation you can think of. The simplicity, that's the whole point. So, here are a few classic examples. I like to think of them as pillars holding up your classroom. Things like be ready to learn, be respectful, be responsible. They work because they're simple, they're positive, and they are incredibly flexible. An expectation like be respectful can cover everything from how you talk to your friend to how you handle a textbook. You can tweak the wording to fit your style, of course, but the idea of having these big, memorable pillars, that's what's key. Now, listen up, because this is probably the most crucial takeaway of all. You can't just write these on a poster, hang it on the wall, and call it a day. That's just decoration. That's just signage. For expectations to actually work, you have to treat them just like you treat math or science. They have to be taught. And that teaching process really has 4 key parts. First, you have to model it. Show them what being respectful actually looks and sounds like. Second, you have to let them practice it, especially during tricky times like class transitions. Third, you've got to reinforce it consistently with your own language. And fourth, you have to revisit them. Circle back after a long weekend or when things just feel a little off. They have to be a living, breathing part of your classroom culture. All right, let's pull all of this together into something you can really use. Here's a simple little checklist to help you take a look at your own classroom and see where you can bring in a bit more clarity. So just take a second and ask yourself these questions. Do I have just 3 to 5 broad expectations? Do I actually teach and model them, or are they just on the wall? When I have to correct a student, am I talking about our shared expectations, or am I just pointing out a broken rule? And finally, am I predictable? Is the way I reinforce them consistent? This little checklist, it really gets to the heart of this whole thing. And this last question, this might be the most powerful tool you have. When you see the same behavior problem happening over and over, before you jump to bigger consequences, just pause and ask yourself, was the expectation really clear? Did we actually teach it? Did we practice it? If the answer to any of those is no, or even kinda, then your next step is teaching, not punishing. So let's end with this. Strong classroom management, it doesn't come from being stricter. It doesn't come from a longer list of rules or tighter control. It comes from radical, intentional clarity. Because when our students know exactly what's expected of them, when they know the roadmap to success, and when they know that mistakes are just part of learning, they don't just comply. They feel like they truly belong.